Okay, so now let's open this back up to localhost 4200. And it looks exactly the same, which is the way we want it. So to get started, I'm gonna open up another terminal. And everything that I do for authentication, I like to put it in its own authentication folder, right? So let's just go ahead and write ng g s and then auth, and I'm gonna write user. So now we've created a boilerplate user service, and it's located within our source app auth folder. And I'm also going to create a model, and that's going to be auth user. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is, and I'm going to call it authorization, and make sure that I append that route to that folder. Okay. So let's Okay, so second step, now that we've created, let me just add one more folder for services, just to keep this thing organized. So then we'll grab 4 of those and move them to the services folder. Okay, so next step is we need that API, codelabs2021.herokuapp.com API/v1, right? So that's going to be our root URL for our API. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to stick it in our environment.ts, but also our environment.prod.ts. So environment.ts gets switched out with environment.prod.ts when we deploy to Roku and whatnot. So I'm going to write root uppercase API, assign it as a string, and you'll see I have no slash after v1. It's just the way I do it. You don't have to do it that way, but it helps me keep better organized within the services. So I'm also gonna paste the same thing into our environment.prod.ts. And I'm gonna save that. Looks like we're still running great. So next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to our user service. So as Lee has laid out in the documentation on Postman, we have a sign up, we have a login, and we have a log out, and we also have a me, right? It's get. These are the only endpoints I'm worried about for tonight. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna kind of lay out this service, and I'm gonna write sign up user. log in, user, get user profile. And what else do we need? Oh, sign up, log in, log out, right? So now I've kind of got laid out in my head what I want to do within this service. So let's start mocking up these endpoints. So in our user service, everything's going to take users appended to our root URL, right? So I'm gonna grab that and I'm gonna write root URL and I'm gonna assign it as a string. Then I'm gonna write this dot root URL equals backticks $, single brackets, environment. Should have imported it for us, but it did not. Dot root API. So okay. All right, slash users. And then I'm also gonna include private HTTP and HTTP client. There's nothing important for me. Okay. Something's messed up in my local settings here, so I'm just gonna copy and paste some stuff. Yeah. And then let's start setting up our service methods. Let's see. So sign up takes all of this. Usually when I'm laying these out, I like to write like this. Format that real quick. All right. So log in. It's email and password. Log out takes auth token. Get user profile. Takes auth token. All right. So we're going to pass it params, right, from our component. And then I'm going to write return this.http any for now. We can strongly type this later. Backticks, $, single brackets, this dot root URL slash sign up. I'm gonna copy this. Grams. Oh, I forgot to post. Dot post, because that's the method we're using on this endpoint here for sign up. Same thing with login. User profile. We're going to replace the post with get and sign up with me. And let's move to log out. So that's a delete method. So we'll write delete any text $, single brackets, this dot root URL slash log out. All right. Let's take a quick 5 to 10 minute break, and then we're going to come back and lay out the user model and also the authorization header service. And then we're going to move on to testing login, our auth service, and also log out. Okay, everybody, I'm back. So what I did was I opened up Lee's API documentation within Postman, my Postman app on Mac. And I went ahead and signed myself up just by using the post for API/v1/users/sign up. So we've got this JSON response that we can model our return models for user and also the base model off of. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to go to source app shared models, and I'm going to create a new model called base response.tx. And in this model, I'm going to write export class base response brackets. I'm gonna paste this in. So on our base response, which is the unnested value for user, so we don't need this, right? All we need is success and payload. So I am going to define success, and I'm going to assign that as a Boolean. And I'm going to write payload any, and also errors of any. Okay. And then I'm going to write a constructor method. Brackets inside that, brackets inside that. I'm going to get rid of this boilerplate response. And I'm going to write success equals false dot rest. And I'm going to write object dot assign this, which refers to this model, and I'm going to write rest. So just to explain what's going on here, when we call new base response, we hit this model, right? So we've defined success of Boolean, payload of any, errors of any, and then when it hits our constructor method, by default, we hit success equals false. So even if it's null, we'll return false at this point. And then by writing rest, the rest of the payload that's sent to this constructor, we immediately call object.assign this, comma, rest, which we just defined within our constructor. So at that point, we can assign this dot success equals success, and we can also write this dot payload equals, and we're going to write a ternary here, ternary expression. So rest dot payload question mark rest dot payload, or no, the same thing with errors. So this dot errors equals rest dot errors question mark rest dot errors, or no. So now we've modeled out our base response from the API, and we stored it within source app shared models, right? So now we can start modeling out our user model. So this is what our JSON response looks like for our user model. So I'm going to write ID, I'm going to set that as a number. Email, set that as a string. First name, set that as a string. last name. Set that as a string, name, string, everything else is strings. Nickname, string, token, string. Constructor, brackets within the constructor, brackets out of the constructor. ID equals, let's just give it some default values. Email equals empty string. First name equals empty string. Last name, empty string. Name, nickname, token, and let's also write rest. And object dot assign this, comma. So this dot ID equals ID email equals email. This dot first name equals first name. This dot last name equals last name. This dot name equals name. This dot nickname equals nickname. This dot token equals token. All right, so we've got our user model all set up. So let's remove this JSON response. Save that file. And now let's implement our base response and also our return back to the component. So in order to do that, we need to import some operators from RxJS, right? And we also need to import our base response model. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import map and catch error from RxJS operators. So on every one of these methods, I'm going to write dot type, and for now I'm going to write map data equals and I'm going to set up two new methods down here at the bottom of my service. One's going to be catch error, and the next one's going to be handle base response. And both of these we should set as private. And on catch error, I'm gonna write error. I'm gonna pass it error. And handle base response, I'm gonna write res, and I'm gonna strongly type it as base response. So, all right, if res double and res dot success, right? That's always what we're looking for. If you look at Postman, success is true, and then we have payload, right? So we're looking for if res and res dot success, we return res. Else, we're also going to implement throw error. Since I'm not automatically importing tonight, I will just pull that in from RxJS by copying and pasting. So import throw error from RxJS. So now that we have that method available to us, we can write throw error, which will hard throw an error back to the component. And res dot errors. And still return res. Okay, so now let's set up our private catch error method. So I'm gonna write let error msg equals empty string error dot error instance of with that too. Okay, so if error dot error, and it's an instance of which is typed. That's right. Client side error. Else server side error message equals captex error code error status, and I'm gonna do a line break. And I'll also return the error. And pass it there. All right, so we got that set up. So now on our sign up user method, let's also implement the handle error. So I'm gonna write catch error, and then I'm gonna say this dot handle error. Okay. So now that we have the error handling set up, let's start defining our map statement. So let's write constant res equals this dot handle base response, and we're going to pass it data. And then out of this map, we're going to return res payload. So what we did here is we caught the errors. We're trying to catch the errors, and then we handle the errors. If the error does not exist, we pipe and then map And what we're mapping is this return JSON from HTTP post to our root URL /signup. So then we handle the base response. So here, if res and res.success, we successfully return the response, or we throw an error, right? Just a double catch. And then we return back to the component res.payload. So basically, now that we have this set up, we can just copy and paste on each one of these service methods. Okay, so other side of this is the authorization header service, but in order to retain the logged in user, we also need to implement the local storage service. And we've done this before. So I'm just gonna fly through that setup because it's basically the same on every application that we write here at Code5 Labs, at least. So I'm gonna write nggs shared services and local dash storage. And I'm going to copy and paste this in. As always, I'll be pushing this up to a branch this evening after class. So if you're not, just try to follow along, maybe not code along as much as follow along. All right, so we have that set up and we need to import that into our user service. So import local storage service from right. So I'm right. Private storage service. And like the user service we did before, we're going to have a current user subject and also an observable of our current user. So below that, I'm going to paste in those two methods there. And we also need to define them within our constructor. So below this.root URL on the right, this.current user subject equals new behavior subject of a user type, right? So I probably need to input that to import user from user. Just make sure that's named correct. Yep. Okay, so I got that all set up. We also need to write a couple public and also internal service methods. The first one is public get. Current user value returns a user type, strongly typed, and it returns this dot current user subject that we defined up here, and we set here within our constructor, and we return the value of that current user subject. And so we also need a set current user method, right? So set current user reaches out and sets the item in our local storage service. And then it sets the current user subject dot next, what gives this current user subject a value of user, right? And we also need one more. Right? User. All right, so we set up our observables and our behavior subjects. Also a get current user value method, a set current user value method, and also a remove current user method to remove the current user from storage and set the current user subject as null. So in addition to that, I'm going to remove those two items from storage altogether, or else they'll just be undefined or null. Okay. So that is all set up. Now we need to set up some routes for these. So let's take another quick 5 to 10 minute break, and we're gonna hop back in on setting up our sign up, our login, and sign up in our login method, and then tie that response back from the API into the authorization header service, and also setting our current user value in our user service. Okay, so we're back. So what I did was I set up our routes. First path is empty, redirects to movies, path match of full. Path movies is our movies component. Path sign up is our sign up component. So I also generated source app auth components. I generated login and sign up, right? So I have a route for sign up and a route for login. So now that we got that set up, we can modify the app.component.html to, instead of just rendering the app movies component, let's write router outlet and let's save that. So I shut down and I reopened Angular repo and imports started working again. So I don't know if it was stuck in like the middle of an update for Visual Studio Code or just wasn't pulling in, the Colabs 2021 preferences packages for Visual Studio. Don't know what the case was, but sometimes it's like if all else fails, restart, shut it down, shut the server down, shut your code editor down and open it back up. So now we have, when I refreshed on localhost 4200, we get redirected to the movies path and we're showing all of our movies down here. So that's working as intended. If I replace movies with login, we should get that boiler login works, right? Also, let's try out sign up. Sign up works too. So we're good to go with building out these components and hooking it up to our service. And then we also HTTP interceptor, right? And so we imported that. And there's two variables passed to this. Request, which is defined as HTTP request. And we're going to set that as a type of any. And also next, which is our HTTP handler. So just to verify, we imported handler and request from Angular common HTTP. So now let's finish out this method. So I'm going to grab blacklisted routes. And I'm going to paste those in here and uncomment it. Still don't have format. Okay, so we define the blacklisted route. In this case, it's just one. And we also need to define constant token. And then we reach out to this dot storage, or local storage service, and get item of access token. And we also want to define user equals this dot storage dot get item. All right, case user. And let's define a let found equals false. And now here's where the blacklisted routes come into play. So I'm gonna write a for each loop on the blacklisted routes. And if the blacklisted route matches the request.url, then we set found to true. So for let I of, or let I equals 0, and I is less than blacklisted routes dot length I plus plus. All right, so now we have that set up. So now we check if the blacklisted route at that level in the array equals the request URL. So if blacklisted routes, and I want to write an array bracket of I. So for each route in the blacklisted route, we're adding 1 to I, right? So we start at 0, which users login would be at 0. But if we had other routes within our blacklisted route, this is how we would find based on the index within that array. So if blacklisted routes I triple equals request square brackets URL found equals true, and we want to break from that for loop. Okay, so outside of that for loop, we need to put a check in for if user and token and found triple equals false, constant auth request equals request dot clone, and then we want to set the headers, right? This is where we're appending the authorization within the headers for the HTTP request. So authorization and I want to write backticks, error, $, single quote or single brackets, token, and that's it for that. And then I want to return next dot handle auth request, else return next dot handle request. Seeing that change would in that string, and the API looks for this string value here and then the token. But in this case, we're using authorization error and then the token. And other things is you might have, you know, like 50 blacklisted routes that we don't want to send this authorization header to. So those are the two things that change. Once you've written this out once, you can basically use it in every project. Okay, so now we have all of our services set up, right? So now that I've already signed up, I am going to write out the login component and hook up the user server. So first thing I'm going to do is pause the microphone here. Okay, I think we're good now. So I'm going to replace all the login component.html with some pasted in HTML that has our email and our password, has form controls, also has error variables and some submitting variables. One thing that I cannot do, let's see. Okay. So now I'm going to go to the component and I'm going to grab some code from there. Okay. I'm just cleaning up a couple things in the user service from when I did not have my imports working correctly. So a couple errors here. So after sign up, I want to pass the params. After login, I want to pass the params. Why? Okay, so I wrote this a little messed up here. So our catch error needs to be inside of the pipe. All right, private catch error. Now we need to rename catch error to email error. Okay. This response needs inputted. All right. So we've thoroughly debugged our user service. So user. Okay, so now let's navigate. Oh, one thing I did not do. We need our forms modules, right? And our imports within our app.module.ts. So So let's write forms module and also the reactive forms module. And if we save that, now we're all good. So let's just take a look at what localhost 4200 looks like. And I'm gonna go to /login. All right, so now we have a pretty ugly looking form. And we also haven't registered sign up, right? When we go to our sign up. So I'm gonna right click, inspect. Now that we have this component set up. Okay. So our login component, right? It calls the login user method in our user service. And we post the params, we catch the error, we map the data. But one thing that we want to do, since we're subscribing to current user out of this service, we want to set the current user, right? Okay, just to make sure here. Okay. So at this point, we want to use data or res dot payload, right? Then we declare a new user model, and then this dot source set item access token res. Does that need to be token? Yeah. Res dot, or actually, let's just do new user dot token. We set new user, then we set the current user subject next. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna throw a debugger at the top of this. And I'm gonna throw a debugger at the bottom of that before the return. Then I'm also gonna go to our login component. And below the params, I'm gonna throw a debugger there. I'm gonna throw a debugger at the top of the submit form method. And then I'm gonna throw a debugger inside of the if statement. And also the error statement. Okay, so now we can go back out. So go to login. First, I'm going to show you an error. So I've got the incorrect password, correct email, incorrect password, right? So I'm going to hit login. So login form is valid. So make this a little bigger. Okay, so I'm gonna step through this. Let's see what our form looks like. Yep. Let's see what our params look like. Looks good too. Yep. I'm gonna hit play. And we have an error. We've thrown an error. So if I hover over error, we have error, success, false. Errors, user not authenticated, right? 401, unauthorized. So I might play. And you notice at the top that we have this kind of generic error message. Okay, so now I'm going to enter the right password. Right click, inspect, bring this down a little bit, and hit login. So I'm at the top of my submit form method now. I'm just going to hit play because I know. Yep. So now you'll see we're within a login user method within our user service, right? So the data that's being returned there is payload of a user, right? And a success of true. So I'm gonna step through this. We hit our handle based response. Stepping through our user model. And now we are setting our access token within our local storage service, right? So we're setting that. So since I'm caught this right at that point, if you navigate in your dev tools, you've got element, console, sources, network, performance, memory. You also have application and lighthouse, right? So if I go to local storage, God, I got a bunch of crap in here from different projects. Access token. So that just got set. Let me go ahead. I'm gonna delete these other ones just so we have a good understanding of what's actually getting set there. Okay, so now that I've cleared that out, let's hit play. So after that, we also set the current user. So I just want to verify that we correctly set it, which we did. ID of 10, email is Zach@Codify.Works, my first name, the last name. You can see all that down here in a better formatted JSON response. And we have the token, nickname, name, right? It depends, Zach, plus my last name. So back to sources. If I hover over res.payload, press play. Now we're back within the login user method of our login component. Current user data. So we're passing back just the user object. Then we set submitting to false, and then we navigate to movies. All right, So everything worked correctly with that. We caught an error. And we also successfully logged in. So next step is to show you all retrieving that current user from local storage. So I'm removing all my debugger statements right now from our logging.component.ts. And I also want to remove it from my user service. Then I'm going to copy this get user profile method because I want to show you how the authorization header works as well. So let's go to source app movies, right? So this is not for like, for the public. We just want to kind of test out that we have our current user. We can retrieve our current user, and also we can call a method within a user service that requires our user auth. So here I'm gonna write private user service, and we're going to import the user service. I also want to define a current user and strongly type it as a user. And I'm going to write a method called retrieve current user. So I'm going to write sub to current user. And I'm also going to write retrieve current user profile. And write this dot subs on both of these. You figure out what's going on with this dot subs right now. Oh. My bad. Okay, so like any other component, so if we're subscribing to subscriptions from our XJS, we need to also unsubscribe on an ng on destroy. So each time this component is destroyed, like we don't load that path anymore, then we need to write this dot subs dot unsubscribe. And that takes care of that. You can also explicitly do it, like, like after this, like you can have some other subscription here, right? Say like get now playing sub. And then, this.subs.add, and then after this.movies.output, we could do this dot, I'm gonna write subs.unsubscribe if this was the only one, but it's not. So we're taking care of this by each time the component is destroyed, we unsubscribe from the subs. So in our sub to current user, we're calling out to the current user subject. We're subscribing to the data. In if data, we're console logging current user and subscription equals data. But also, in addition to that, within our constructor method, we're reaching out to the user service to grab the current user value. So that's just like the raw in time moment. But, say something happened to your subscription for current users, say you logged out. If this component was not reloaded, you would still have the current user set. So say, it's a route that is kind of, you can be logged in or you can be logged out. At that point, you would need to sub the current user to update that current user variable. So within ng on init, I'm gonna write this.sub to current user. And I'm also going to finish out the retrieve current user profile method. Subscribe. Okay, so we got that written out. So I'm also going to call that retrieve current user profile. And just to show you the off service working, we'll just use the dev tools to inspect. So we only have a few minutes left with this. I'm going to finish out the sign up as well and push that up tonight. But for tonight, as far as in class teaching, we're just going to stop at examining this. So let's go ahead and all right. So definitely got a 401 unauthorized here. I'm just going to look at these code real quick just to make sure that I have me. Token. Okay. So we need to modify that auth header service because it takes token. Okay, so the first thing we did was within our constructor of our movies.component.ts, we're retrieving the current user subject from our user service that reaches out to local storage and grabs that value, right? And we have everything there, right? In its raw form as soon as we load this component. So I'm hit play. Play out of get now playing. Get out of the movie helper. Out of that. Out of trailers. Okay. We still have a 401 unauthorized. Hey, Lee, can you slap me with if it's token or it's bear on that API? Please. All right. Oh, I'm dumb. Sorry, Lee. This is just part of it. So I don't know if you guys noticed that I'm over here in the network tab, right? And first it has general, and then it has response headers, and then you get to request headers, right? So I looked through this and our authorization header is not there. And the reason for this is we didn't add it to our app.module.ts. So let's debug that and try it one more time, and then this will be it for tonight. First thing I want to do is I want to go back here. I want to change that to bear. Save that. I'm going to go to app.module.ts. And I'm going to declare within our providers array within our app.module.ts. I need to import this stuff, import HTTP interceptors, and also the authorization header service. Without this, we'll never touch that service, right? Because providers, it intercepts each HTTP request and it uses the class of authorization header service. So now that we have that implemented, let's go back out to our movies. Now I'm gonna open up the network tab. I'm gonna reload. I'm gonna step through all this stuff. Okay, so you see that we console.log user profile, which this endpoint requires that token, the access token, to be appended to the request to be able to retrieve the user data, right? So I'm gonna go to the network tab, and it's the second API call, which is /me. And if we go down to the request headers, we now see that we have this authorization header with a bare space and then our current user access token. This is one last step to this. In our movies component, I'm gonna write div class equals with 100 and class equals row div class equals 12 and 2 text center H4 and on that div class with 100, I'm gonna write an ngF statement. ngF equals current user, right? And I'm also write another div class equals column 12 text center to MT4 MB4, and then I'm gonna write button class equals btn outline primary click equals log out user log out. Okay, so now we need to set this method. Super simple. Log out user, call this dot subs dot add this dot user service dot log out user subscribe data if data this start was null, and we also need to say this dot user service dot remove current user. We're removing the params from that method. And correcting that spelling mistake. Okay, so now that we have that set up, if you see on localhost 4200, below Lee's fabulous header up here, we have welcome current user .name, right? And we also have a logout method. So make sure that that's working. That's not. This two is not a function. And save it. Yep, I didn't save it. So I forgot to save the component.ts. So let's try this again one more time. I'll close that out. So if we log out, we're routed to the login. But if we also go to /movies, we no longer have that welcome current user .first name, right? But also just to show you how that subscription works to current user, as the last thing for tonight, I will change this log out user, remove current user, and we'll just comment out this.router.navigate to log in. And also in my movies.component.ts, in our subscription to current user, if data console.log current user and subscription equals data, I want to write this dot current user equals data. If no data, if it's null or undefined, I want to write this dot current user equals null. And just for shits and giggles, I'm gonna write current user logged out or isn't okay. So I'm gonna log back in. Okay. So now if I log out, it's immediately taken away. And the reason for that is because we're subscribing to that current user subject. So if we right click, inspect, open up our console. So we see initially on this component load, we have current user in our subscription, right? And then we reach out and get the user profile. And then in the else statement of our current user subscription, we set this current user equals null, and then we console.log current user logged out or is not logged in. So that's it for tonight. We are not going to start the employer projects on Thursday. So this is a buffer day, and we're also not going to be there in Paducah in person. So it's a free day for you guys to get caught up, guys and gals, to get caught up on your movie app projects, but also try to implement this authentication that I did tonight and that I'm also going to push up for the sign up, right? Try to implement this, and just like I did, throw debugger statements everywhere and just kind of get a better understanding of what's actually happening within this application as we log in, as we sign up, as we log out, as we call other methods from the API. So take your time to do this, and that's the challenge for this week. And me and Lee will be checking on your guys' code come Monday. And excited to get you guys started on the employer project. And yeah, good luck. Thank you all.